Rome built the greatest empire in human history. Augustus gave it law. Caesar gave it vision. Trajan gave it its greatest borders. But for every builder, there was a destroyer. 5 Roman emperors proved that the purple robe fits madmen just as easily as statesmen. 5 rulers whose decisions killed thousands of Romans and nearly killed Rome itself. This is the definitive ranking of the 5 worst Roman emperors who almost destroyed an empire. Number 5. Made Rome unspeakable in 4 years. Number 1. Kicked his pregnant wife to death, burned his own city, and died begging a servant to kill him. These emperors didn't just fail. They betrayed every Roman who believed the title Caesar meant something. Number 5. Elagabalus, the emperor who made Rome unspeakable. In 218, the Roman legions of Syria proclaimed a 14-year-old boy emperor. He had never governed a city. He had never commanded soldiers. He had never sat in a senate chamber. What he had done was serve as a hereditary priest of the sun god Elagabal in the Syrian city of Emesa, dancing barefoot before an altar, wearing jewelry and makeup, performing rituals that Roman soldiers found alternately fascinating and incomprehensible. His name was Varius Avitus Bassianus. Rome would remember him as Elagabalus, and his 4 years on the throne remain among the most destabilizing in imperial history. He was proclaimed emperor because his mother and grandmother, both formidable political operatives, spread the rumor that he was the illegitimate son of Caracalla. The legions hated the reigning emperor Macrinus. They wanted a Severin. They got one. But nothing could have prepared Rome for what arrived. Elagabalus brought the black stone of Elagabal, a sacred meteorite, to Rome and installed it in a new temple on the Palatine Hill, directly beside the Temple of Jupiter. He declared Elagabal the supreme god of Rome, subordinating Jupiter, king of the entire Roman pantheon, to a Syrian sun deity. He forced Rome's most sacred religious objects, including the sacred fire of Vesta, to be relocated to his new temple. He married a Vestal virgin, the most profound religious violation possible in Roman society. Vestal virgins were sworn to 30 years of celibacy under penalty of being buried alive. His personal conduct scandalized even a Roman court accustomed to imperial excess. He appointed favorites to senior government positions based on criteria that had nothing to do with governance. He appeared in public in women's clothing. He reportedly offered vast sums to physicians who could surgically make him anatomically female. The administration ceased to function entirely. His grandmother Julia Maesa, who had engineered his rise, watched in horror as her plan collapsed. She convinced Elagabalus to adopt his cousin Alexianus as heir. Then she arranged his death. In March 222, the Praetorian Guard murdered Elagabalus and his mother in a latrine. Their bodies were dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the Tiber. He was 18 years old. The Senate condemned his memory, damnatio memoriae. His name was chiseled off inscriptions. His statues were destroyed. The sacred stone was sent back to Syria. But the damage outlasted the erasure. He had entrenched the precedent that armies could make emperors from the eastern provinces, based on hereditary mysticism rather than merit. The crisis of the 3rd century, 50 years of military anarchy with over 50 claimants to the throne, grew directly from the soil Elagabalus tilled. Number 4. Caracalla, the emperor who murdered his own brother. On the 26th of December, 211 A.D., Emperor Caracalla invited his brother Geta to their mother's chambers for a peace meeting. The brothers had been co-emperors for 10 months, sharing the empire, sharing the palace, hating each other with murderous intensity. When Geta arrived, Caracalla's soldiers were already hidden inside. They stabbed Geta to death in his mother's arms as she screamed and tried to shield him. She was covered in her son's blood. Caracalla then turned to Rome and executed 20,000 people suspected of loyalty to Geta, senators, soldiers, friends, anyone who had ever spoken his brother's name with affection. Marcus Aurelius Severus Antoninus, nicknamed Caracalla after the Gallic hooded cloak he favored, was born in 188 A.D. son of Emperor Septimius Severus. His father saw what was coming. On his deathbed, Severus reportedly told his sons, "Be harmonious, enrich the soldiers, despise everyone else." They ignored the first instruction immediately. Caracalla's reign was defined by violence and paranoia. He massacred the citizens of Alexandria after they mocked him in satirical plays, ordering his soldiers into the city and killing tens of thousands. He executed the great jurist Papinian, one of Rome's finest legal minds, reportedly because Papinian refused to write a speech justifying Getta's murder. When asked why, Caracalla simply said it was easier to kill him than argue with him. His economic policy was cynical in its genius. The Edict of Caracalla in 212 AD granted Roman citizenship to virtually every free inhabitant of the empire. Historians initially praised this as enlightened universalism. It wasn't. Citizenship came with inheritance taxes. More citizens meant more revenue. Caracalla needed money to pay soldiers. He raised military pay by 50%, the largest increase in Roman history, because he knew his survival depended entirely on their loyalty. He then debased the currency to cover the gap, creating a new coin worth 2 denarii, but containing less silver than 2 denarii. Inflation gutted the middle class. On April 8, 217 AD, Caracalla stopped beside a road in Syria to urinate. A soldier walked up and stabbed him. The Praetorian prefect Macrinus had arranged it. Nobody mourned. He was 29 years old. His name became a warning. Emperors who spend their reigns murdering and plundering eventually run out of people willing to protect them. Number 3. Honorius, the emperor who lost the West. On the 24th of August, 410 AD, Visigoths under Alaric breached the Salarian Gate and sacked Rome for the first time in 800 years. Citizens were killed in their homes. The Eternal City was looted for 3 days. Slaves rose up. Senators fled. The psychological shock reverberated across the entire civilized world. Saint Jerome, writing in Bethlehem, said, "The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken." Emperor Honorius was in Ravenna. He had moved the Western imperial capital there in 402 AD because it was surrounded by marshes and easier to defend. Not to defend Rome, to defend himself. Flavius Honorius was born in 384 AD, the younger son of Theodosius I. He became Western emperor at 10 years old, ruled through regents, and never developed any capacity to govern. When a messenger arrived to report that Rome had fallen, ancient sources recorded that Honorius panicked, crying out that Rome was dead. The messenger clarified, Rome the city, not Roma, his pet chicken of the same name. Honorius reportedly relaxed. The story may be apocryphal, but every historian agrees it captures something essential and true about the man. His greatest general, the half-Vandal Stilicho, held the Western Empire together through sheer brilliance for 15 years, defeating Alaric twice, repelling barbarian invasions across multiple fronts. In 408 AD, court rivals convinced Honorius that Stilicho was plotting to install his own son on the throne. Honorius ordered his execution. The Western army Stilicho had built promptly disintegrated. Tens of thousands of barbarian soldiers who had served under him defected directly to Alaric. 2 years later, Rome fell. Honorius then spent his remaining years executing political rivals at court, squabbling with his own sister, and watching provinces slip away one by one. Britain was abandoned. Gaul was carved up by Burgundians and Visigoths. Spain was lost to the Vandals. He made no meaningful effort to recover any of it. He died in 423 AD of edema, having reigned 28 years, long enough to preside over the complete dismemberment of everything his father had built. Edward Gibbon blamed Honorius above all others for the fall of the Western Empire. A man who had every resource, every institution, every tradition of Roman governance at his disposal, and retreated to a marsh city to watch it all dissolve. Number 2. Commodus, the emperor who thought he was Hercules. In 192 AD, Emperor Commodus renamed Rome. The city that had stood for 9 centuries became Colonia Lucia Annia Commodiana. The months were renamed after his imperial titles. The Roman legions were renamed the Commodianae. He renamed himself Lucius Aelius Aurelius, Commodus Augustus Herculeus Romanus, and had statues of Hercules recarved with his own face. He entered the Colosseum personally to fight as a gladiator, believing this demonstrated his divine status. Senators were forced to watch their emperor hack at ostriches with a crescent-bladed sword and hold the severed heads toward their section of seats, a pointed reminder of what he was capable of doing to them. Lucius Aurelius Commodus was born in 161 A.D., the son of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, the last of the 5 good emperors, widely regarded as the greatest ruler in Roman history. The contrast is almost cosmically cruel. Marcus Aurelius wrote the Meditations. His son renamed December after himself. Commodus accompanied his father on military campaigns, but showed zero interest in governance. When Marcus Aurelius died, in 180 A.D., Commodus immediately negotiated peace with the Marcomanni, the barbarian tribes his father had spent years systematically defeating, and returned to Rome. The military considered it a betrayal. He did not care. He governed through favorites and freedmen, delegating actual administration, while he obsessed over gladiatorial combat. He fought in the arena over 1,000 times by his own records, always against crippled opponents, wounded animals, or fighters quietly instructed to lose. He charged the public treasury 1 million sesterces per arena appearance, the treasury that was already under severe strain. His paranoia escalated steadily. He executed senators on fabricated charges. He saw assassination plots everywhere, because there genuinely were assassination plots everywhere. By 192 A.D., even his innermost circle had reached their limit. His mistress Marcia, his chamberlain Eclectus, and praetorian prefect Latus conspired together. Marcia poisoned his food. The poison worked too slowly. They sent in a wrestler named Narcissus, who strangled him in his bath on the 31st of December, 192 A.D. His death triggered the year of the 5 emperors, 4 civil wars in a single year. The Severan dynasty that eventually emerged governed through military force alone. The tradition of governing through law and institutional legitimacy was finished. Historians mark Commodus as the pivot point. Before him, Rome could still be called a republic in some meaningful sense. After him, it was openly a military autocracy, dressed in republican clothing. One man's delusion about being Hercules cost Rome its constitutional soul. Number 1. Nero, the emperor who burned Rome and blamed the innocent. On the night of July 18, 64 A.D., fire broke out near the Circus Maximus. It burned for 6 days. 3 of Rome's 14 districts were completely destroyed. 4 more were reduced to rubble. 1 million Romans were left without homes. Ancient sources reported that while the city screamed, Emperor Nero watched from the Tower of Mycenaeus, wearing theatrical costume, playing his lyre, singing of the fall of Troy. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus was born in 37 A.D., the great-great-grandson of Augustus. He became emperor at 17 through the schemes of his mother Agrippina the Younger, who poisoned his adopted father Claudius to place her son on the throne. For the first 5 years his reign was competent, guided by the philosopher Seneca and the general Burrus. Then Nero removed every restraint on himself, one by one. He had his own mother murdered. He kicked his pregnant wife Poppaea to death in a fit of rage. He executed his former tutor Seneca on fabricated conspiracy charges. He arrested Christians and blamed them for the great fire he almost certainly started himself, feeding them to lions in the arena, burning them as human torches in his palace gardens while he watched from a chariot. His fiscal recklessness compounded every atrocity. Nero debased the silver denarius to fund his extravagant construction projects, most notably the Domus Aurea, his golden house, a palace complex so vast it consumed 300 acres of central Rome. Suetonius wrote that Nero complained it was merely a house fit for a human being. The inflation that followed his currency debasement hollowed out Roman savings for a generation. The provinces erupted. Gaul revolted. Spain revolted. Britain under Boudicca nearly broke free entirely. His own Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers sworn to protect him, abandoned him. The Senate declared him a public enemy, the first emperor to receive that designation. On the 9th of June, 68 AD, with soldiers closing in on all sides, Nero fled to a freedman's villa outside Rome and attempted suicide. He couldn't finish it. He begged his secretary Epaphroditus to help drive a dagger into his throat. His last reported words were, "What an artist the world loses in me." He was 30 years old. His misrule triggered the Year of the Four Emperors, the bloodiest civil war Rome had seen in a century. 4 men seized power in 12 months. Tens of thousands died. The treasury was stripped bare. The legions learned that an emperor could be made and unmade by soldiers alone, a lesson that would haunt Rome for the next 200 years. Elagabalus mocked Rome's gods. Caracalla murdered his own blood. Honorius surrendered the West from the comfort of a swamp. Commodus replaced governance with gladiatorial fantasy. But Nero did all of it first and worse, burning his own city, blaming the innocent, executing everyone who tried to restrain him, and spending his final hours not thinking of the million Romans he had left homeless, but mourning the artist he believed himself to be. That is why he stands alone at the top. These 5 emperors failed when Rome needed them most. But their failures became lessons. Later emperors studied exactly what went wrong. Diocletian rebuilt the administrative structure from the rubble of the 3rd century crisis. Constantine stabilized what remained. The Eastern Empire survived another 1,000 years in part because it learned, painfully, through blood, what kind of man must never be given the purple. The worst rulers in history earn their place in memory, not because their failures were inevitable, but because they were chosen. Rome handed these men everything: loyalty, legions, treasury, the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 years. They wasted it. That deserves to be remembered, so it is never repeated.